thanks for tuning in. I am Jolie Odell. This is VentureBeat, and I'm here with Paul Querna, who is the systems architect at Rackspace. He's also a Node core contributor, has been for about a year and a half. And he's going to talk to us today about all things Node. So put on your developer hats. If you don't have one, go get one. Come back in a couple months. All right, so Node. Where do we want to start? We did talk a little bit about how the real-time web was like this big buzzword, going back to maybe '08, a little bit before that.
Yep.
But it was kind of a shade tree, hacky way to get to real-time behavior. But
Right.
Node does it intentionally and does it well.
Yeah, I mean, the website started doing interactive things, right? And you could use your traditional frameworks to kind of do them. So yeah, it definitely emerged out of kind of that need to start putting real-time data on websites. But it's kind of even expanded past that to being just a good system to build things in. You know, large distributed system, which is the internet as a whole is a big distributed system. But you know, companies now, it's very easy to have 100 servers doing lots of different things. And asynchronous systems built around that are, I think, something that wasn't done very well before Node. And so Node does enable those things to work well. And
you were saying one of the things you do like about Node is it's very minimalist design, it's simple, and also it doesn't screw around too much with concepts that developers disagree a lot about.
Right, yeah, exactly. So the Node core is quite small. There's only a few protocols really that are built into it, you know, like HTTP, because everything's over HTTP. But you know, things like WebSocket, which is an extension to HTTP, isn't in the core. Things like database drivers aren't in the core. You know, how your data is modeled when, you know, Rails and Active Record, people are still fighting about how to do that, right? And so when it's not in the core, you know, it's up to the community. There's still a lot of choices, and you can figure out what you want, but it lets the core kind of figure out its core concepts really well and just be really good at those things. So yeah, it has a very minimalist design. I mean, HTTP, DNS, a few other protocols, and that's it.
So it's nice and strong and doesn't introduce too much controversy into I think a field that maybe loves controversy a little bit too much. Now we were also talking about that little period in maybe October, November 2010 where it made the '02 to '04 jump. And I think that was when bigger companies, I mean everybody in San Francisco was talking about Node, all the hackers in town wanted to get their hands into it. But there was a little bit of FUD about, will Node scale, will it work for large stable systems? Like for example, LinkedIn's mobile app. And you said that the '02 to '04 jump really had a big impact on that.
Yeah, I mean, so the '02 still had a lot of, it was the first actually like stable branch actually. So 0.1 existed, and there was 0.2 was like, okay, we're not going to keep breaking the APIs every release, right? They said we're going to have a stable set of APIs, and that was good, but there were still like some core concepts that need tweaking, and there were some features that were just completely broken. And so about a year ago, was when a lot of the work, a little more than a year ago now, was when a lot of the work went from 0.2 to 0.4, and you know, things like fixing the streaming APIs, fixing SSL, so you could do HTTPS requests and they worked and didn't just not work, was a lot of the big work that went on there. And yeah, with 0.2 there certainly was maybe some truth to the FUD, that there were just random things in Node that didn't kind of work and weren't really always thought out. But that was kind of the jump from 0.2 to 0.4, was that we fixed a lot of those things, and today I think those concepts from 0.4 onward, we haven't really changed much, right? Like we've added a few things or done Windows porting or other things, but the core concepts are now kind of stable. And so what I think you see in these, you know, systems, you know, like Rails doesn't scale, and some of those, you know, I don't know what the right word is, memes of these things don't scale, is that people disagree with the core concepts, right? They said Active Record is not a good way to write a database layer. They're not saying much. I mean, so that's why I think where Node is at, no one's disagreeing with the core concepts very much anymore. The core concepts in Node, people kind of think, yeah, that makes sense. I agree, this is how an HTTP server is created, right? No one disagrees that an HTTP server has a request and a response. You know, so when people are fighting about like the core concepts, you should be worried, right? But I think Node is past that at this point.
Let's talk for a second about, I mean, because that period of like a month or so last year, you were there. Did you see like a huge influx of contributors, new contributors, and new contributions? What was it like to be in the Node core contributor community at that point?
Right. About a year ago is when we actually split I think the users list from the core developer list, because every day there were like 300 new emails about someone building their first Node module. But we were trying to solidify core concepts, and it was kind of distracting. So that was the first time we split the mailing list into the Node.js dev versus the users list. And it was actually kind of, looking back on it, the explosion in user growth was insane. And you don't always see that in other languages. Like I've been involved in like Twisted Python for a long time, and it just never reached that kind of momentum. And even like a measurement Ryan always used sometimes was the number of users in the IRC channel. And like every month it would go up by like 100 people. And that's on the free Node IRC channel, just hanging out and asking questions about Node. And you don't see that. Normally channels there are like stable at their number of people for like 3 years, right? And this channel, every month, 100 more people join. So it was, yeah, it happened very quickly too.
I was talking to Yahoo's CTO, and he said that he thinks JavaScript is like a really underrated technology, and that Node, for him, is the next Rails. Do you think, that's a lot of hype to live up to.
Yeah.
But do you think that there's some truth in all the hype?
Some. JavaScript as a language has many fundamental issues. You see Google release their Dart language as their attempt to try to, correct those issues and make it go a different direction. But while there are fundamental issues in JavaScript, you can understand those issues in after your first month of programming JavaScript, right? It's a very easy language to just write things in, and that's what people care about, right? Like people say like PHP might be a flawed language because of all the things in the standard core, but in the end, people just want to build things. And so while JavaScript has issues, they don't really stop us. Like we're building big systems, and hundreds of thousands of lines of JavaScript. It's not about those language issues about like prototypical inheritance and things like that, where people want to add native classes and all these other things. Like they take an hour to explain to someone the first time if they've never used prototypical inheritance before. You take an hour, you sit them down, you talk through how this works, you make a few demos, and they get it because it maps to these other concepts. It's just the implementation's a little funky. So yes, I think there's some truth to it though. That it has a potential to be very disruptive to technologies like Rails or web server frameworks in general. So yeah.
Definitely. Now this is the last thing we're going to talk about, but one of the bigger, more exciting things to come out of the Node community that I think even the press cared about a lot was the Windows port, and how that kind of opens up Node to maybe a more mainstream type of developer.
Right. Yeah. So I think I relayed to you earlier my story of how I got into programming was I used Windows and I installed Perl from ActiveState on Windows, and that's what got me started programming a long time ago. And you live in this world of Silicon Valley, and you're kind of isolated from what the rest of the world is doing. And the truth is, there's a lot of Windows servers out there, and a lot of people with Windows laptops, and they deploy on Linux. And so just the accessibility makes a big difference. And I think you look at Python. Python has a native Windows installer that's quite good and easy to use. And a year ago, we kind of said, okay, the core concepts are solidified. What would it take to actually make a native Windows port? And do it right. And so the difference between Node's Windows port and other open source ports is Node actually adopted the Windows I/O model of how it does I/O completion, which is a kind of low-level thing, but most ports of open source software, they take the Unixy ideas and try to put them on top of Windows. And it ends up that the Windows software is buggy and slow because these Unix ideas are just different enough. And Windows, though, gives you usually higher level primitives, like the system calls. So what we did for Node to Windows is we basically used all the Windows level system calls, the right way to do it in Windows, and then ported those high level system calls over to Unixes and Linux. And then on Linux, it turns out you can implement I/O completion ports with epoll, and it's not a problem. But going the other way is actually quite hard. So it was kind of an inverse of how most programs are ported to Windows, is we kind of made the Windows port really better than Linux, and then backported how things work to Linux, which is why I think actually it's not just ported to Windows, it's fast on Windows, right? People are posting benchmarks where you put the same hardware. Node is actually faster on Windows, which is very rare for most open source languages. So
it'll be really interesting to see how the adoption curve changes after the Windows port.
Yeah, I think to me, it's about enablement. You have to let people, if they use Windows on their laptop, fine. right? They play games too or whatever. They're developing in a different environment. And I think you still see a lot of people that might develop on Windows and they deploy on, their work deploys on Linux, and that's fine. And you just have to let them have the language they want to have.
No judgment.
Yeah, no judgment.
Right. So are you going to be at the Node conference in January?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Well, I will see you there, Paul. I really appreciate your coming in. And thank you guys for watching. We are as excited about Node as you are, and I promise I will keep telling you more Node stories as time goes on.